And everybody, thank you so much for being here and welcome. This is for the Title IV Part A Student Support and Academic Enrichment Grant. And this is for the applications for the 2019-20 school year. So I'd like to start by giving a little bit of history and purpose. So what many of you may know is that the Elementary and Secondary Education Act was revised in December of 2015 and became the Every Student Succeeds Act. And one of the changes that occurred in there is that Title IV Part A has a student support and academic enrichment grant. And the focus of that grant is to increase educational equity and opportunity for students, focusing in the areas of well-rounded education and also safe and healthy students. Those two areas are the primary areas in the state of Utah, and also actually as part of ESSA is concerned, those are the two primary areas. But then also we want to include an effective use of technology portion for anyone who is receiving $30,000 or more within this grant. So once again, Utah has a focus of priorities around well-rounded education and also improving school conditions with safe and healthy students. And then we also have a additional component of effective use of technology that I'll explain more about in a little bit. The application for the grant is available, started in early January of 2019 and is due to the state office on March 1st, 2019. In this webinar and on the website, there's a place that you would fill out a letter of intent. It is due on February 1st, 2019. The focus of that letter of intent is to let me know that you intend to apply for the funds that are allocated to your LEA. And it is 4 questions that asks, what is your name, what is your email, which LEA are you from, and then it also is verifying that you plan to submit the letter of intent. Please note that the person submitting the letter of intent should be the person who is over Title IV-A in your district or charter school. The goal of having the grant due on March 1st is that gives us time to go through and approve funds and have award letters out by May of 2019 so that people can use the funds during the summer, so this summer, and then the grant goes all the way through to August of 2020. We want to make sure that we talk about grant applications are to meet criteria based on the ESSA guidelines with USBE parameters, which means that in last year, if you are familiar with this, we had a competitive grant process where awards were anywhere between $30,000 and $200,000. Last year it was competitive. This year it is based on formula. I will describe that a little bit more in just a moment. But because it is based on formula, this is not a competitive grant as much as it is here's what each LEA is allocated in funding. And when you are allocated that amount in funding, that you just have to meet the parameters of what is required by ESSA and the parameters set up within the grant. Also wanting to share this now, but we'll share again, is that there is, as of today, the formula sheet is an estimated formula sheet. It is on the Title IV-A website. I will be sharing that website again with you in the next few slides. But if you have been on the Title IV-A site and haven't seen the formula sheet, it is now up there. It is an estimate. The final sheet will be out as soon as Jamie Barrett is able to get that to us. But wanted you to know that the amount of funding that you receive or are eligible for Title IV-A is proportionate to the funds that you receive for Title I. I want to also stress this now, and it comes up again later, is that your Title I funds that are specific to schools, your Title A fund is specific to the district. So even though Title IV-A allocation is based on the district's amount for Title I, Title IV-A can be used within the district in the ways that meet the needs assessment. They don't have to be used in the same way that Title I funds are used, nor do they have to be used proportionately within each of those schools. Your Title IV-A funds can completely be used based on needs assessment that your district puts forth. So again, same formula as Title I, but not necessarily the same parameters. In the application that is on the website, it includes the needs assessment, research to support your project, work plan, and then also the budget with justification. Please note that just like last year, LEAs may partner with organizations such as nonprofits, institutions of higher ed, museums, and community organizations if you'd like. You also may apply for funds as a consortium of 2 or more LEAs, and you can use other ESEA program funds to strengthen and coordinate complementary services. And I want to share that, for example, if you happen to be an LEA that gets $6,000 and another LEA gets $6,000, your 2 LEAs may join together as a consortia to meet the $10,000 base requirement. So the same thing is true in some of our other ESSA plans, that if your district or charter were receiving less than $10,000, you'd want to combine in double or multiple consortia to make sure that you are meeting that $10,000 threshold that is required through ESSA. So please note, if your funding is less than $10,000, you'll want to partner with another LEA. You can also talk to me about how that you could talk about using other program funds to strengthen and coordinate services. Excuse me. If your LEA receives more than $10,000, then you do not have to do that, but of course you are welcome to do that if you'd like. The needs assessment is similar to last year as far as when you're setting up the application and what that looks like. But the other point, the other point I would like to make and information to provide you is, if you completed a Title I needs assessment and you would like to use the same Title I needs assessment, you can do so. You do not have to recreate another needs assessment for Title IV-A. However, because people have asked this in the past, if you would like to have an additional needs assessment that is specific to something within the grant that you're applying for, like for example, if you wanted to find out, this is just an example that I give, if your LEA has underrepresentation of females, if you will, in STEM-oriented courses, then if you had a needs assessment that showed that, then your Title IV-A funds could actually be used to help support and strengthen more females attending and being enrolled in those courses, just as an example. Again, making sure that everyone knows that the priorities fall under the 2 content areas of well-rounded and safe and healthy students. However, this is also important, and because all grants had at least $30,000 last year, I want to make sure that if you do receive more than $30,000 in your allocated funds, then you also must include how you are going to incorporate effective use of technology. You can say how you are using your digital teaching and learning grant to support the work that you are doing in your SSAE. Like for example, I'll share with you that this past year, Murray School District is an example of an LEA who used their SSAE funds for professional learning and then combined those funds with their digital teaching and learning grant to leverage both of those. And so however you wanted to talk about effective use of technology is great. Let me do say this, the effective use of technology does not have to be a significant part of your grant application when it comes to funding. However, it cannot be a significant amount. In fact, at most 20% of your grant can be used in technology, and of that 20%, 20% of that can be used for infrastructure. So the total amount of your entire grant, at most 4% can be used for infrastructure in that 20% of 20% conversation. And then the evidence-based requirements. So we talked about a needs assessment, we have a work plan, and then also evidence-based. One of the things that you want to make sure is once your needs have been identified, that when you are creating your work plan and what information you're going to use, make sure that you have relevant evidence-based activities, and you want to make sure that they are going to improve student outcomes, and then the effectiveness that depends on the local context. So Let me give an example of those evidence-based interventions or the practices that you have going on. You want to make sure that when you are doing the portion on evidence-based practices, that you are using research that includes either strong, moderate, or promising evidence, and that basically you want to make sure it's well designed and well implemented. And if you don't have the quasi-experimental or just the experimental study in general, that you also have something that demonstrates a rationale based on high quality research findings or positive evaluation. And there's also another document that is here that I'm sharing with you that goes through what are the tiers of evidence that you're using when you're incorporating and talking about the research that is there. And the next part is letting you know where these priorities happen to be. And when it comes to the priorities, you have your needs assessment, and then you also want to say how your needs assessment and the plan that you have connects to these priorities. So on page 3 of the application, you'll notice that there are these 8 different priorities that come from well-rounded and safe and healthy students. When you are completing your application, it will say what is the goal that you have, how does it relate to your needs assessment, what is your work plan, and what are the priorities. In fact, I would like to go ahead and show you this document that's right here. This is in the application. You will write out the goal. You'll then also make sure that you are talking about how are you addressing your needs assessment, so the learning gaps that determine your focus. And notice that the last column that says identify priority or priorities from section 2B, that is referring to these priorities here. So make sure that you have your needs assessment and your work plan, how you're going to measure it, and then also that you tie to these priorities. Please note that your whole plan does not have to tie to more than one priority from well-rounded and safe and healthy students, but it can. Your goals can have multiple, and they can come from both section A of well-rounded, and they can come from section B of safe and healthy students. One more time, if your grant allocation is more than $30,000, you also must include in your plan how you're going to incorporate the effective use of technology. And this is also on page 3 or the bottom of the application that as you're going through this. The next thing is talking about funding. You also want to make sure that when you are using your SSAE grant funding, that you are making sure that you are supplementing, not supplanting. So you can provide additional services, staff, programs, or materials that are not provided with state or local resources. And then federal funds cannot pay for resources that would otherwise be purchased with state and or local funds. So in other words, where you have your FTEs, you cannot hire another teacher and use that FTE funding in a different way. That would be supplanting. However, what you can do, what you can do is thinking about allowable expenses, which would include things like ongoing professional development based on the Utah content standards that comes from the well-rounded portion of the priorities, and then also making sure that that professional development is aligned with the professional learning standards. You can also hire personnel to carry out identified programs and services, and then you can also purchase supplemental resources and equipment, and then leverage resources of other federal and state to support a holistic approach to your well-rounded education. Again, when you're going through it and you're talking about your budget and you're doing your budget justification, you want to talk about how you are supplementing, not supplanting work that you are currently using. So thinking about this would be not supplanting funds that would otherwise come from federal or state programs. You also would not use funds to pay for travel or attendance at a conference. So like a one-time, one-shot kind of conference situation is different than ongoing professional learning. And then also just things that make sense, like you can't purchase cell phones. If you hire someone with the funding to do work for you and you're kind of like, and that person needs a cell phone, you can't buy the cell phone with Title IV-A funds. You can't buy a cell phone for anybody. And then also, if you are thinking about just technology in general, kind of goes by the way of, if you can't purchase it for digital teaching and learning, then you also would not be able to purchase it for Title IV-A. And then finally, not being able to use funds to acquire real property, rent space, or obtain capital expenditures. Again, if you think about it of, if I can't purchase it for Title I, then I could not purchase it for Title IV-A. So thinking about what that looks like. We also have high leverage strategies that we wanted to share with you. This is something that we have that is new this year. You do not have to use these. However, we wanted to let you know that if you were thinking about submitting your application and wanted to see some examples, we have examples of high leverage strategies to be used. So for example, one of the first ones that was completed was the mathematics. So notice that in the mathematics, it has A1, implement Utah core standards, A2, implement a support structure to ensure student success on grade level core standards. Those happen to be the priorities from Well-Rounded, with examples of things that you may wish to reference or incorporate into your professional learning plan, or basically your grant in general. I want to highlight and stress that you do not have to use these, but these are just here as potential references. And notice that it also includes priority B and C. That's an example of math. Here is also an example from the safe and healthy students side of things. So here's priority B with all of the different safe and healthy strategies that are related and things to consider. And I know I've said this a couple of times, but I do want to really stress that our goal with this was not to be prescriptive, but to put some suggestions and opportunities that would be out there as you move forward in your application process. And then when you go to the Title IV-A website, you'll notice that there are multiple content areas that have these options and things to be considering. And with that being said, I am going to actually spend just a moment showing you the Title IV Part A website. We have some new things that have been added, and would like to share that with you. So as I go through here, just give me one moment and I will get the website up so that you can see that. And on the website of Title IV-A, here is national information from ESSA that provides information about the program, and then also the what line by line ESSA is reporting is true for Title IV Part A. On the Student Support and Academic Enrichment Grant tab, this is where you can find the application, the checklist, the instructions. By the way, on the instructions, I do want to open this for you, because on the instructions on the second page, this is where you can click on the letter of intent. And that's where I was saying that the letter of intent is due on February 1st, but it also is those 4 quick questions of the name of the person, their email address, which district they're from, and that they are verifying that they are planning to submit an application, and that person is also in charge of, is going to really be my person that I'm connecting with throughout the whole grant process. And then the high leverage strategies that we mentioned, and then this is the estimated Title IV Part A. Please notice that this says estimated right now, but it is a very, very close estimate. We are just having to wait for final approval because Title IV Part A funds are based on the same proportionate amount of Title I. So as soon as Title I funds are verified for those exact amounts, then Title IV-A will be also verified. Just to give an example, I would not imagine that anyone's funding in that situation would be more than 10% off, and even less than 10% of, like, it would be very minimal, the change. So you can absolutely use that to move forward in your planning and getting that in. And then the other thing that is on here also happens to be within the application itself, the instructions, is the timeline. And the big things to note on the timeline are that the application came out at the beginning of January. The deadline for that is March 1st. A reason for that March 1st deadline is to make sure that we can get through all of the applications and have award letters out so that LEAs could start using funds starting this summer. So my goal is to have the award letters out by May so that funds can be utilized, and then the award process or the award letter timeline is from May 2019 through August of 2020. So all funds would be able to be used both this summer and throughout the school year, and then also next summer as well. And then the resources and training, this is where you will find information regarding today's webinar. So you may have linked here, or you may have received the email from me from earlier today. But it also will have, today's webinar will be linked onto the website so that you can have access to that later. And with that being said, I would love to answer any questions that you may have. And the first one is, sorry about that, perhaps this will be answered later. If LEAs do not apply, does the amount dispersed increase like the digital teaching and learning grants increased because few LEAs applied? Actually, I think almost all, this is a great question. With the letter of intent that is there, the funds that are not used will be reallocated. How they will be reallocated will depend on the amount of funds that currently exist. It may be that there is a little mini grant that could be applied for that would could be added to someone's current grant, or it may be a potential redistribution. I know that when it comes to potential redistributions, depending on how much money it is, if it's minimal, it sometimes can actually create more, it can be more difficult to have people being able to spend their funding than if we had, like, for example, a mini grant. And it says, if we join a consortium, do both schools need to have the same goal? And the answer is, when you do join a consortium, you submit one application and one LEA then chooses to be over the grant. So your goals would not have to be the same exactly, but you would just submit one application. I hope that makes sense. So in other words, when you submit the application with the consortia, just because any LEA that submits a grant can have one goal or they can have multiple goals, your needs assessment though would have to show how the needs of the LEA is connected. And then I'm also going to say, I appreciate that people are putting things in the chat box. You can also unmute yourself. And I would love for someone to be able to do that, just so that I know that you guys can unmute yourselves, because right now everyone is muted. I don't think I have to do that. But I also am happy to answer questions that come into the chat box. And then also, if you have a question that you'd like to ask, but you don't want to put it out for everyone, you can also send the question directly to me. I will still answer it out loud, but if you wanted to, if for some reason you wanted to be more anonymous with the question you're asking, you can just ask it directly to me and then I'll answer it out loud still. And with that being said, I am going to say that I am here to answer any questions that you have. You can, like last time I had the webinar, I had a few people ask me questions the next day. You can always email me. I will go ahead and put my email. My email is on the website and in the emails that I sent out. But I also just am including it here. And otherwise, I will also share that I am here to answer questions, but I am not planning to share anything additional. The application that is on the site, I highly recommend looking at the instructions first. And then as you go through the instructions, the application is a fillable PDF. So you would then just download the application and then go through the application checklist before submitting it. And again, the letter of intent is due February 1st, and then the application is due March 1st. And when it says, when will the webinar be connected to the website for additional people to listen? The last webinar I did is already connected to the website, and then today's webinar, Jerry is so fast, I think it took him, it takes, I think, about a day because he has to organize it and then get it to our website team, and then they put it up. When they do put it up, they will put it on the tab that is resources and training, or when it becomes just listen to the webinar, we may also put it on here because it's connected to the grant just for now while the grant is open. As I am thinking about frequently asked questions, there we go. Sorry, I'm going to totally be answering questions, and thank you for saying thanks for the people that are either privately or to everyone saying thank you. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks everyone for being here today. The question came up, it says, are there any other criteria we would need to meet in order to apply or receive a grant that isn't included in Title I? No, that is a great question. Pretty much if you have your needs assessment from Title I, and from your needs assessment, there maybe are ways that you want to enhance your Title I, or maybe there are ways that you want to do something different than what you have in your Title I. You can use the same needs assessment. In fact, I started to say one of the frequently asked questions in thinking about it is, people have said, can you, if you have a needs assessment for Title I, can you still provide another or an additional needs assessment? And the answer to that question is yes, you can. So yes, you can. But there's the only, when you say other criteria, there's not other criteria that is different. However, you do need to fill out the application. You can't just be like, I have Title I funds, so because I have a needs assessment, can I have the Title 4A? The 4A, you do still need to fill out the application. And a question on, will you provide feedback on our plan before official submission? If your plan is submitted prior to the March 1st deadline, last year I looked through for people who submitted their plan well in advance if there were things that like I did not give feedback on how to enhance your application, but if there were ways that it didn't meet criteria, like if the page length was too long or it wasn't double spaced, things that are part of the instructions, I would let people know. Otherwise, I will share with you that for the most part, the reviewers that are looking to make sure that we meet guidelines are happening in the first 2 weeks of March. So I will look at the applications that come in early, but unless there's something that really sticks out, it will be the first couple of weeks of March that we really dig into that. And that's a great question. Thank you for asking that. Another question that has been asked quite a bit, or I shouldn't say asked quite a bit, but has come up is, what if you qualify for Title I funds but you didn't use them? Can you still apply for Title 4A? And the answer is yes, you can apply for Title 4A funds if you did not accept your Title I funds. But again, the Title IV-A funds that you would need to be either in a consortium if you were otherwise receiving less than $10,000, or if your amount is more than $10,000 and you turn down Title I funds for whatever reason, you can still apply for Title IV-A, but you would also still need to submit a needs assessment. Your needs assessment does not have to be as comprehensive as the Title I funds, but you would still need to have a needs assessment to show how you're choosing to use the money. And you guys, thank you so much for being here. I'm going to be online I will be here for another 5 minutes in case someone's looking through the application and has questions for me. So if you happen to be looking through the application, and more importantly, if you happen to be looking through the instructions for the application, I'm here to answer questions. But if you don't have any questions, I am just going to say one more time, thank you so much. I see some people are taking off and hanging up. But I'm happy to stay on until I have answered everyone's questions. And it says, what if there is no amount listed for our school in the spreadsheet? And that's also a great question. I'm going to say this. If your school qualifies for Title I funds and your school is not listed in the spreadsheet, then please let me know. If your school does not qualify for Title I funding at all, or your district, I shouldn't say your school, I should say if your district or charter school, or in other words, your local education agency does not qualify for Title I funds, then you also would not qualify for Title IV Part A. And I'm sorry, I'm like, in the beginning when I was talking about the amount being proportionate to Title I, if for some reason your local education agency does not qualify for Title I funds, then you would also not qualify for Title IV Part A. And if you received funds last year, but you are noticing that you would not receive funds this year, I will tell you it is because in Utah last year we went with a competitive grant, and this year the Every Student Succeeds Act, the government, the federal government has said that the competitive is not an option anymore, that everybody is, if I'm reading a question and trying to answer it and say something at the same time. And then this one says, we qualify for Title I, we just don't receive the funds for it. And that is fantastic. So if you're kind of like, we do qualify for Title I, but we have turned down the funding, and you would like to connect with us so that I can also speak with Jamie over in finance, that would be fantastic. And that sounds great. Thank you. And so just for the person that's on there, if you wanted to, you could even probably call me in about 10 minutes because I'm thinking we'll be done here. I'm just going to put my phone number in the chat box as well. Thanks. And yes, that's a great question. That yes, the consortia can be 2 or more districts or charter schools, and the purpose of that is that Title IV-A does not. It's one of the reasons that we did the grant application last year. That we said that the applications needed to be at least 30,000. Is that Title IV-A does not allow for funding less than $10,000. So. So in doing that, if your allocated amount would be less than $10,000, then coming together as a consortia would be so that you would reach that minimum of $10,000. And thank you, everyone. And then also, please know that you can also email me. I know that we were talking about like having someone text or ask the question about calling. You're more than welcome to call, but you're also more than welcome to email me. And I also have my email address that's in the chat box. So I do also want to share that if you're trying to figure out what your percent or what your amount would be for Title 4A, based on Title I, like for example, if you know that for Title I, you would normally receive $500,000, then your anticipated Title 4A would actually be, like I said, if it was $500,000, it would actually be less than $50,000. And the reason for that is that the Title 4A is just under 10% of what Title I happens to be. So that can also give you an idea